Now that we've learned how to diagram the appositive, let's talk about why sometimes they get commas and sometimes they don't. Let's read and compare the following sentences. William Shakespeare's classic tragedy, Hamlet, has been made into a dreadful Broadway musical. And here it is again. William Shakespeare's classic tragedy, Hamlet, has been made into a dreadful Broadway musical. Well, you read it the same, but I want you to notice there's an appositive, there's tragedy, and I'm renaming tragedy with the word Hamlet, except the first sentence has commas and the second one doesn't. One's actually correct and the other one's incorrect. Let's figure out why. Well, in this case, it's the second sentence which is correct, not the first sentence. It's all about how many tragedies Shakespeare has written. When I use an appositive, I have to consider not the appositive, but the word that it's actually describing. And so, in this case, because Shakespeare has written multiple tragedies, I don't want to put commas around this appositive. Let's talk about why. Once again, that one is the correct answer. So if I said my friend Jason recently adopted a Moroccan monkey through an internet site, or if I said my friend Jason recently adopted a Moroccan monkey through an internet site, there's a difference between this. Both of them would be grammatically correct, but the meaning would change. When I put commas around something, it's like saying it's not necessary. It's like putting big parentheses around the word Jason, as almost as if I don't need to say it. So if I said my friend recently adopted a Moroccan monkey through an internet site, well, if I just simply said my friend and I put commas around the word Jason, that implies that I don't have to say the word Jason. When I say the word my friend, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Further, that implies that I have only one friend. But if I said my friend Jason, that means that I actually have more than one friend. And so that's the reason why we didn't put commas around the word Hamlet. Shakespeare has multiple tragedies, and therefore we don't put commas around Hamlet because we want to explain which tragedy it is. See, the comma is a way of letting us know, but it's not really necessary to say. It's kind of superfluous, meaning that it's extra. So when I say my friend and put commas around Jason, it's like saying I don't have to say the word Jason. When I say my friend, you know who I'm talking about because I have only one. Most of us have more than one friend, so we'd probably choose the second one. Let me give you another example. If I said my friend Jason as opposed to my best friend Jason, this is a little more challenging. Well, you think about it, how many best friends are you supposed to have? Well, by definition of the word best, there's supposed to be only one best. So in this case, if you have only one best friend, then you should put commas around the name Jason. Because when I say my best friend, it should be pretty specific. I shouldn't have to clarify who my best friend is because you have only one. So the commas would make sense. So when you're dealing with appositives and adding commas to an appositive, it focuses not on the word Jason. It focuses on the noun that it's renaming. How many best friends do you have? Or how many friends do you have? Let's take a look at some other examples. The writer Tim O'Brien has written many novels about his experiences in the Vietnam War. Well, how many writers are there? There are lots of writers. For that reason, I don't want to add any commas to this sentence. Our high school's overly enthusiastic math teacher, Mr. Heiser, was pumped for Fight Song Friday. Now, in this case, Mr. Heiser is renaming teacher. Well, you have multiple teachers, but how many overly enthusiastic math teachers do you have? Well, for some of us, he's the one and only, and for that reason, we might put commas around there. But you might be thinking, I don't know, I think we have other overly enthusiastic math teachers. Maybe Mr. Belos is on your list of overly enthusiastic math teachers. Well, for that reason, then, if you find there's more than one, the commas would disappear. Here's another choice. You can actually put the appositive first. Our high school's overly enthusiastic math teacher, comma, and then we go into Mr. Heiser. So in this case, the teacher now becomes the appositive, and Mr. Heiser is the main noun. Just another option for yourselves. Selfie, an obscure word a few years ago, is now an everyday term. So when we focus on putting commas around a positive, think about the word that it's actually renaming and how specific is it. In this case, the word selfie is very specific. A very specific word doesn't need any extra explanation. It's like saying my best friend. It's pretty specific. There's only one. The word selfie is pretty specific. It's not going to be confused with any other word. For that reason, commas make sense. I don't need to explain what the word selfie is or where it came from. It's just simply selfie. It's a very specific word, so the commas make sense. Luke won Georgia's heart by reciting her Oranges by the poet Gary Soto. This is an error I see a lot, where people try putting a comma after the word poet. There's multiple poets in the world. Gary Soto's a great poet, but he's not the only poet. By putting a comma in, it makes it sound like he's the one and only poet. He's not the one and only poet, so there's no comma needed in this one at all. We, the Diversity Club members, will be sponsoring an international food festival next week. Well, I can see that Diversity Club members is renaming the word we. Okay, but we's pretty general. I'm not sure who we would be. If I tried putting commas around the Diversity Club members, I'm left with a sentence really which is saying, we'll be sponsoring an international food festival next week. Sure, it makes sense. I just don't know who we would be. So therefore, I need this information to help explain who we would be. And anytime you need the information, don't break it up with commas. Kate Chopin's short story, The Story of an Hour, is far better than her short story, The Kiss. This is another error I see a lot, particularly when students are writing about literature. Well, the short story is renaming its title, The Story of an Hour. Well, by the nature of the sentence alone, it shows that Kate Chopin has written more than one short story. If she's only written one short story, that's different. But what I have is short stories renaming its title, or the title rather is renaming the word short story twice. The Kiss is renaming this short story. The Story of an Hour is renaming this short story. If I put commas around those titles, which I've seen people do a lot, think about what you'd have left over. Remember, the comma almost makes something seem like it doesn't matter, or it's not necessary. So if I ended up putting commas around those titles, you'd end up with a sentence which says, Kate Chopin's short story is far better than her short story. That doesn't make any sense at all. That's the reason why we're not going to add any commas. I need to explain which short story you're talking about. It's absolutely necessary to have those titles. No commas. Here are some other choices that you have. You can also use the word or to create an appositive. Mrs. Cockle, or the physics queen, mesmerized her students with her end of the year plate spinning and fire eating demonstration. Well, the way it's written right now, without any punctuation, it sounds like there are two different people, Mrs. Cockle or the physics queen. But what if I'm actually calling Mrs. Cockle the physics queen? Well, if I use an or to create an appositive, that's great. Just going to make sure that you put commas on both sides. We oftentimes forget the second comma. We have to make sure we have both to kind of encapsulate that appositive. And here's another one. You can also use a colon to create an appositive. Cyan wanted only one thing after her AP Chem final exam, ibuprofen. Well, in this case, you could use a comma if you wanted to. But this time, I think a colon's even better. It's renaming that word thing. And so we put a little colon there to rename that, or to introduce that appositive at the very end of the sentence. The one thing I didn't add in is a period. That's kind of narrow-minded on my part, isn't it? All right. With this being said, take on the rest of the sentences on your worksheet and see if you can find places where you're going to add commas around the appositives when it's absolutely unnecessary to the sentence. When the appositive is necessary to the sentence, make sure you don't add commas. I apologize, my video's not over. Last one to review. My brother Rick handedly won the hot wing contest with 5 dozen chicken wings in under 20 minutes. My cousin Chuck scored thousands of dollars on a Name That 80s Tune game show. To review, once again, why did my brother Rick get commas and my cousin Chuck didn't? Well, I have only one brother. And if I have only one brother, I can put commas around the word Rick. But if I have more than one cousin, then I don't put commas around the word Chuck. I want to explain which cousin I'm talking about. Am I talking about Chuck? Or am I talking about Wendy? But if I have only one brother, I can put commas around him. Remember this as you take on the rest of this worksheet. Now my video is officially finished.